Erna in Seattle, Washington. Hi, Erna. What's your question or comment for David Nasaw?
Oh, yes, indeed. Firstly, I wish to tell you how appreciative I am, and I'm sure many others here in the Northwest are, of your outstanding program. The focus, it's a two-part question. The first part is that Joseph Kennedy, it was purported, had offered Jackie Kennedy $1 million not to divorce John Kennedy due to his revolving door of women's sexual encounters. And the second part of the question is, after Jackie Kennedy's divorce from Aristotle Onassis, she did not remarry, but she had a constant companion there in New York or Manhattan who was already married, and etc. I would appreciate clarification on both of these points. Thank you very much.
All right, Erna, we will ask Professor Nasaw that as soon as he gets settled on our bus. And Bill in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, what's your question or comment?
Yes, thank you for taking my call. I enjoy your show very much. JFK, when JFK entered office, he was faced with the Bay of Pigs, and he had to decide whether to do it or not, whether to proceed or not. I want to know what influence Joe had on JFK's decision to continue with the Bay of Pigs, and then after the disaster began, April 17th, April 18th, April 19th, and it was all falling apart, what influence did Joe have on JFK at that time?
Thank you for that. And it looks like Professor Nasaw is ready on our C-SPAN bus, or just about ready. We'll take one more call from Patricia in Hyattsville, Maryland, here in the suburbs. Hi, Patricia.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. My question is a variation in broader perspective to the first question person from Seattle, and that is this. Would Professor Nasaw comment on Kennedy's regard and treatment of women? He obviously treats women differently in his own marriage between his wife and the reported liaison with Gloria Swanson, but it's a theme that appears to have carried through to his son's marriages. And so it's a broader question. Could the professor comment on that regard between the messages between the father and children?
In just a minute, David Nasaw, the author of The Patriarch, The Remarkable Life and Turbulent Times of Joseph Kennedy, will be joining us for a call-in. We're taking a couple of pre-calls while he gets settled. 202 is the area code, 585-3890. For those in the East and Central time zones, 585-3891 if you live in the Mountain and Pacific time zones. Professor David Nasaw is now on our C-SPAN bus, is almost ready to join us. And we're going to take one more call from Bert in Panama City, Florida. Hi, Bert.
Hi. Thank you for taking the call.
Please go ahead, sir.
Well, to put it bluntly, was Joe Kennedy or wasn't he a Jew hater?
All right. We will ask him about that as well. Reminder that we will be live from the National Book Festival all day again tomorrow. And that begins at noon. So all-day coverage on our two-day National Book Festival this year in 2013. This is the 13th annual National Book Festival. Professor Nasaw, we have some questions for you, and we're going to begin with one from Erna in Seattle. And Erna wanted to know about Jackie Kennedy's relationship with Joe Kennedy, and specifically, what was there money exchanged for her to stay married to JFK, and particularly with regard to JFK's extramarital affairs?
Joe Kennedy loved Jackie, and Jackie loved Joe Kennedy. I mean, they had a very strong relationship. After Joe Kennedy's stroke, when Joe was a crippled old man, and when his right hand was gnarled like a claw, the rest of the family would cover up that right hand with a blanket or a sleeve. Whenever Jackie came in, she would uncover it and hold that hand as if to say, whatever's happened to you, I love you. No, I have no evidence that Joe Kennedy gave Jackie any extra money, either for her dresses or her fashion or to stay married to Jack. She knew exactly what was going on. Jackie Kennedy was a smart woman. She made decisions by herself, and she made the decision that she was going to stay married to the President of the United States.
And Erna also wanted to know about Jackie Kennedy's relationships post-Aristotle Onassis. Erna said she had a constant companion in New York.
I don't know. I don't know. My book was on, my expertise on the Kennedys goes as far as Joseph P. Kennedy, and it doesn't go past his stroke, really, in 1961 when he stopped being an active character on the American stage.
What year did Joseph Kennedy die?
He dies in 68, soon after, 68, 69, soon after the death of his second son by assassination.
How aware of the death of RFK was he?
He was aware. He was not as aware. He was already beginning. When he had his stroke, the doctors said that he would have, first they said he'd never come out of the hospital after that stroke. Then they said he had 3 months, 6 months, a year. He lived 8 years, which was absolutely remarkable, absolutely remarkable. But the decline after the assassination of the president was formidable. He was conscious. He could understand what people were saying to him. He communicated with his children all the time. Bobby's death in the summer of '68 was too much. He never quite recovered from that.
We had another call, Professor Nasaw, from Patricia, wanting to know about Joe Kennedy's view of women.
Joe Kennedy's view of women, it's a complicated issue, and one has to understand, the context, the times. Joe Kennedy believed that a good husband was one who didn't embarrass his wife and who provided for his family. And Joe Kennedy, from the very beginning of their marriage together, his marriage with Rose Kennedy, believed that his time, his affairs were his own business. It is a position that I find abominable, and it is a position that many of us find abominable today. But one has to remember that in his social strata and in his time, a husband philandering was not nearly as frowned upon. And Joe believed that as long as he didn't embarrass Rose, that, and Rose must have believed it as well, that the marriage could remain intact.
Bill called in, and he was asking about Joe's influence with JFK, specifically on the Bay of Pigs issue, but maybe you could broaden that as well and talk about whether he had any influence on the administration.
It's a great question. Great question. By 1960, when his son ran for the presidency, Joe had begun to take a back seat, a very back seat, because he understood that his son, the president, and his son, the attorney general, knew a lot more about what was going on in the world than he did. And he wasn't about to interfere. He never went to the White House before his stroke because he didn't want anyone to believe that he was pulling the strings. When the Bay of Pigs occurred, the Bay of Pigs was the low point of the presidency. And we now know from Jackie Kennedy's interviews with Arthur Schlesinger, which were released in book form about a year ago, maybe a little bit more than that, we know that Jack Kennedy was absolutely distraught. His wife saw him crying in the corner. He did not know what to do. At one point, about a week after the Bay of Pigs, Bobby Kennedy said to Jack, "Let's call Dad. He'll make us feel better."